Evening. We are back for our third week of our testimony series, and tonight we are here with Jimmy Harris, and he is going to share his life story with us. So,
Jimmy, good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, where do we start, man? Where do you want to start?
I'm gonna go back pretty far. My story starts with my parents. So my mom had 2 kids, was married, and was a widow by the time she was 17 years old. And my biological dad died in a motorcycle accident when he was 19 years old. And that kind of just set the tone for a lot going forward. My mom was a kid raising kids. She was trying to figure it out on her own. People talk about church, and for me, church was Easter.
Okay.
And the first Easter I remember was my mom getting beat up. So I woke up to get an Easter basket before my brother got his, and saw my mom for the first time, getting hands on her. And I remember Easter was never right after that. People were always like Easter this and Easter that, and I just didn't want any part of it. And for a long, long time as a kid, I grew up with this broken idea of what love was. And I remember being little and kind of coming up, and my mom met my stepdad when I was 5 or 6. I think I was 6. And he was alcoholic. I didn't know at the time that they were doing drugs, but they were. And that progressed into heavier stuff as they got older. But, they were both extremely just heavy drinkers. And Dad was a violent drunk. And, spent a lot of my time protecting my little brother and hiding him. I didn't want him to see what I saw. And I was a kid trying to protect my little brother. And it was just a broken perspective of the world. Mm-hmm. I saw this, just everything was through a broken glass, I guess. And it just drove everything that I did, and I ended up hating the world because of it. And I grew up mean, and for a long time I didn't like the person I was. I hated my home. And everybody that knew me as a kid, all they knew was this mean, angry kid. My friends knew this nice, funny, I was popular, but I was definitely a mean kid. And I remember as I kind of got older into my teenage years, I hated my dad so much for being this mean, violent person, and I had become this mean, violent person. And got into the teenage years, and I was drinking, and I was a violent drunk too. And it had become that point. You've said it in your sermons, my decisions were my decisions. Now, did my parents set me on a road to make bad decisions? I would say yes, but they were my decisions, and it was the life I was leading. And the part of the problem for me with church was growing up was Dad was a very religious man. When he wasn't drinking, he was a soft-spoken, loving, caring man. And my problem was he was one way Saturday night, and then Sunday morning he was drinking his coffee and reading the Bible. And for me, that just, I didn't get it,
Of course.
Yeah, and I had a hard time with that, and I couldn't grasp it as a kid. And I couldn't grasp it even more as I got older. And it was just this huge contradiction in his life. And for me, the older I got, the meaner I got towards him. And it got to the point when I was in high school, I had gone out and got drunk one night at a party and come home, and one thing led to another, and I ended up putting hands on him. And I was living on my own at 17. And and for me, that was kind of the freeing moment. And, I've said, that went on until I was old enough to put a stop to it. And I did. And it went on that way for several years. And I got up into my 20s, and I was playing all these sports. And, the part I find the funniest about the whole thing was, as much as I hated them, all I ever wanted to hear was that they were proud of me.
Yeah.
And, through all the anger, it was just, I was mad constantly. And when I didn't get any of that reassurance, it made it worse. And it was nuts. And looking back, I just couldn't grasp. As a parent, I knew growing up I didn't want my children to see what I saw and live the life I lived. And I knew what I wanted in a relationship. And I got married when I was 22. We were married for several years. I had my son on purpose. It wasn't an accident. We were in love, and one thing led to another, and that just went a different direction. And I ended up being very selfish at that point in my life. And I was lost. I didn't know I was lost. And I was struggling with who I was and who my wife was. We were both kids, and now there was a boy there, and I had to be a father, and I was struggling with that. And I got divorced, and again, I was in my 20s. I was bodybuilding, and I was trying to find my way in the world, and I just didn't know what to do with my life. And I had this workout partner. His name was Vinny, and one of the nicest, most amazing guys you ever met. And he was really involved in this church, and he never preached to me. I knew he went to church all the time, and I was this scumbag going out and drinking every weekend and getting fights, and he never preached, but he just sat there and waited, and my life was slowly unraveling. And
How old were you at this time?
I was 25, I believe, 24, 20, I think it was 25. Well, I had found out that this girl I was dating was pregnant. And I come to the gym and I tell Vinny, I'm like, I don't know what to do, man. He's like, you're gonna go to church with me. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And he was like, I'll pick you up. You just call me Sunday morning, wherever you end up. And because I was going out drinking. And I was like, I'm not gonna do that. And so I woke up Sunday morning, didn't know where I was at, had been at a bar all night. He calls me, I answered the phone, had to find out from the people I was with, where I was. He came, picked me up, took me to this church. And I'll never forget, the sermon was about being a man and taking responsibilities for your actions. And it was, I'm sitting there and I'm surrounded by all these people that I don't know. He didn't tell me that he was surrounded by people he knew. So I'm sitting there in this church and I'm crying like a baby. I smell like a bar, hadn't brushed my teeth, and I was just, this is terrible. And I go down and I'm sitting there and we're going to go eat lunch. And again, still no bad, it's terrible. And I turn around and the pastor of the church is standing there. Well, he's a close talker. And I've never been more embarrassed in my entire life. And he never even flinched, hugged me, said he was nice to meet me. And I became very involved in that church. And I ended up getting baptized at that church. The deal was we had talked a lot, me and several other members of the church, and they were leaning on me really hard to get married to this woman. And I just didn't see it. I love my daughter, but I just didn't see it. And I had all these people who I thought they were just coming at me from the biblical aspect of it. So I ended up getting married, and it never felt right. It just never felt right. And it just never worked. There was always a constant battle between my wife and I, and even no matter how deep I got into ministry, and we did, Vinny and I, we would go down and we did the homeless ministry stuff, and we did all these things, and it, like you've talked about, it's not the works. And I was putting so much work in, and it's just, nothing felt right. And I still wasn't leading a good life. I was still leading this selfish life.
So you're going to church, even serving, trying to follow the rules that are kind of put in place, and in some ways forced into marriage, and yet not really knowing God. Am I right about
Correct,
that?
yes.
Okay.
I thought I was saved. Had I died, I'm still going straight down south.
There are so many people that throughout the years that I've come across that have that same experience and don't understand that those things are good things, but they don't save you, and it's confusing.
Yep.
Where it's like you're doing the right things and you're going to church, but your life isn't different. Things haven't changed. And so, how did you get from there to a place of coming to know the Lord?
Took me almost dying. So I had to get divorced. And when I got divorced, you know, a lot of those people who I thought were my friends and I thought were Christian people, they couldn't turn on me fast enough. You know, and it's one of the things with our men's ministry that we talk a lot about is I don't live in your house. I can't judge you. You know, I don't know what's said. I don't know what goes on. And these people were judging me. They couldn't judge me fast enough. And it soured me. I didn't want any part of the church. Told myself I'll never go to another church. And I got divorced. And not too long after I got divorced, I met my wife. And I'm still leading a very selfish lifestyle. I'm fighting at the time. I was actually getting ready for a fight. And had gone out. We had just signed on a house. And I was cheating on my girlfriend, who's my wife now. And went out and was riding with my friends and had a motorcycle wreck. Bike came over and landed on me at 120 miles an hour. I slid 297 feet. Road rashed the whole left side of my body, broke all the bones in my hand. My leg was almost completely amputated at the ankle. 17 surgeries, 2.5 years of physical therapy later. And in that process, I had become extremely deep in depression. And the doctors were just shoveling drugs in my face. Anything I wanted, they gave me. And by the time it was all said and done, I was taking over 1,000 pills a month.
Wow.
And this went on for several years. And I was so neck deep in my own addiction that my mom passed away. And in the time that my mom passed away, I was judging her for her addiction when I was neck deep in the exact same addiction. And I never saw it.
Wow.
And because she was addicted to prescription medication. Well, I had an excuse because I had prescription and I had medical issues, so it was okay. And it wasn't okay. Well, in the meantime, an addiction is a very selfish thing. You know, you get neck deep in it, you don't know you're in it, and then you're tearing your family. I was tearing my family apart. I wasn't married. You know, we were living in sin, and the whole time my wife's praying for me. Every time I'd walk into a room and she'd be on her knees crying and praying for me, and I would get mad, man. I would get so mad. And I remember there was one time that we had gone and visited the kids, had moved to California, and they went through their own problems, and we missed it because they were so concentrated on me. And we went and visited them in California, and I had gotten so many drugs in me that I was just drunk and didn't know it. And the kids were like, "Mom, he's gonna kill himself." Well, we ended up breaking up for a little while, and I was living in this little rundown mobile home up in Wichita, and I had no job, had no girlfriend, had no family, and the devil was in my ear. "You're a scumbag, you're nothing." And I just took all these bottles of pills and I swallowed every pill I had in the house. And I went out for 2 days. I woke up 2 days later. Don't know why, but you know, God saw something in me I didn't see myself.
Yeah.
And he wasn't done with me yet. And it took a long time. And I didn't get clean immediately. The kids had told her, you know, you need to do something. You know, for me, trying to kill myself and almost dying and none of that wasn't my rock bottom. My rock bottom was with my wife. My girlfriend said, "I'm done." This is a woman who had never stopped fighting for me. Even when I was cheating on her and all the things that I had done to destroy that relationship, my wife never stopped fighting for me. My wife was a straight up warrior. And when she told me she was done, I did what they tell no addict to ever do. I went in and took every pill I had and flushed them. And I went clean on the spot. And it was about a year. It took about a total year to get me clean. I was withdrawals and I was sick, and but I've been clean for 7.5, almost 8 years now.
That's awesome.
But
Good
it was
for you.
it was a hard
Praise
road.
the Lord.
Yeah, and it was a hard road, and you know that moment where my wife tells me that, you know, God's answering prayers, and those prayers, and she never stopped praying. And we got married, and
So were you and her continuing to date through the season that you were apart? Did she?
yeah,
It
and
sounded like
she never stopped.
Yeah.
You know, I had been kicked out of the house, and but she never gave up on that.
Mhm.
I had given up. I was just done, and she never stopped fighting. And the kids never gave up on me. You know, this is their mom, and I was treating her that way. They never stopped fighting for me. And
So she at one point though said enough's enough. Like I'm not putting up with this.
yep,
And how long? What did it take for her? Obviously, you guys are married today, and the story's not over yet. But obviously, there was a turning point with her where she decided, "I'm gonna give you another shot." What was that? What brought that to pass?
we were living in Lark City at the time. She worked at the hospital. And she knew that I was going through all this, but she didn't know how deep into it I was. And one of her friends at work, she got called in. She was on call. And one of her friends from work comes in and says, "Hey, is Jimmy okay?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" Well, I saw him drive into oncoming traffic down the road. He almost hit 2 cars. In my addiction, I had taken a ton of pills and don't remember ever leaving the house and went to get something to eat. Don't ever remember. I remember waking up to her screaming and yelling at me. And it was like this drunken fog. And I remember sitting up, and I remember how everything was just kind of gray and foggy. And it was that moment of instant clarity where she says, "I'm done." And I immediately was just like, "Wait, what?" And that was the moment where I thought, okay, I can't lose her. And that's when it was just 100% the turning point. And for me, it was that moment where I knew I couldn't go any lower. You know, I had made the comment, if you've read some of the stuff I've written, that you know, the first place you need to go is to your knees to pray to God. And it was the last place. He broke me to the point that it was the last place. I was that knucklehead that just had to keep getting broke down until finally I had nowhere else to go. And I went clean, and I remember her yelling at me. And the second she heard the toilet flush, she said, "What did you do?" And it was just this horrible moment of, okay, yeah, I'm an idiot. And it took a long time to get clean. And when I finally 100% clean, the kids are in California. Derek had joined the Marine Corps. Danielle had moved out to California with her and Kaylee. And they were all leading their lives had changed. They were in their own garbage here. But when they left Kansas, they went to California, and they found who they wanted to be. Derek had become a Marine, and he was a husband now. Danielle found this amazing church, and this kid come home with her, who's now our son-in-law. You know, she is what it is. But they found this amazing church, and then all the kids slowly started moving back to Kansas. And the big turning point for the family was Danielle and John moved home, and they had this amazing church in California. Well, they were church shopping, and they went to church. I don't remember how many churches they went to, but they kept coming home, and they just said, "I don't know. I don't like the music. I don't like this. Pastor, I almost fell asleep 3 times when he was preaching." To be clear, I've never fallen asleep during a sermon. But they came home after several months, and they were like, we found our home. They wouldn't shut up about it. And I was tired of hearing it. I didn't want any part of it. They got Shelly to go. Shelly came home, and she's like, "It's so amazing, and it's great." And I was like, "I don't care." And
now, had you still not been back to church
I had not been
since leaving and having the bad taste left over in your mouth with divorce?
I had visited a couple churches to make the family happy, but
Okay.
had I died, the accident, something I hit on every now and again, but I don't go back to it a lot. When I had the accident, I immediately, from the time I hit the ground, I bet I said it 1,000 times. There was 2 guys that saved my life. And they'll tell you, I said it at least 1,000 times because they life watched me into Wichita. I kept saying over and over and over again that I was sorry. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And I get it, I didn't get it at the time. But as I've prayed and I've kind of become to know God, for me, had I died on the pavement that day, I was going nowhere but hell. And I was I didn't know it at the time, but I was apologizing for this life that I was leading. And so the family starts going to Crossway, which is the well. And the family slowly starts coming in. Everybody's pushing me harder and harder to go to church. And I'm like, I'm just refused to do it. And it was Logan, my son. I was sitting on the end I was laying in bed because I worked nights. So the family comes home from church and I wake up to him sitting at the end of the bed and he's like, Dad, you really need to go to this church. I really think you need this. And I was like, fine, I'll go. Mm-hmm. Well, I wore the most inappropriate clothes I could wear. I was daring you to say something. You didn't. And you delivered the sermon speaking straight into my soul. And my wife is eyeballing me the whole time on the drive home. He was talking to you, right? And I was like, I brushed it off. I do what a lot of people do. And came back the next week and Branson delivers a sermon. It was the same thing. And it was like he was talking straight into my soul. And I couldn't get up out of my pew fast enough. Went forward. You and Branson prayed over me. I gave my life to God right there on the spot. A few weeks later, I got baptized. And I had been baptized at the other church before, but it just wasn't real. And for me, this was a public profession of my faith.
Yeah. Amen.
And I had washed, and it was just, things hadn't changed, but they were starting to turn. And I had that constant conviction. Like I was still cussing and treating people like garbage, but I had more conviction, and it was slowly starting to churn that coal. And the big one was men's encounter. For me, that moment that everything clicked was men's encounter, and it was Larry Brooker, it was Larry Brooker. He backdoored me and went through the wife, and she was like, and I didn't know anything about it. She told me on Thursday, she's like, you're going to men's encounter. And I was like, what? I'm not doing that. She was like, oh, you're going. And Derek went, therefore I had to go. And I remember we weren't at Launch Point yet. So we were at Countryside at another church. No one knows who I am. And we're screaming and yelling at each other in the parking lot. And you'd have thought like I stole her lunch money the way she was carrying on. And like I said, and Derek's knocking on the window. He's like, so we go to men's encounter, and in the course of that weekend, God broke me wide open. And I've been going back ever since, 4 years now. And every time I've gone, it's been in it. Josh said something here a while back that you can't lead until you learn how to follow.
Yeah. And
I've been a leader my whole life. In all the athletics, everything I've ever done, I've been a leader, but I've never learned how to follow. And starting to follow God has been a learning process. And for me, I've been surrounded by great people doing great things. And I've known Marcio for 1 million years, and I've known all these guys that are just amazing people in what they do. And I didn't have anybody like that church-wise. And the well is just full of these amazing people who just love God. They're just great people who love God. And it's infectious.
Yes. And
I surrounded myself with the right people. And our family, my kids are solid in their faith and who they are and who they want to be. But it hasn't been easy. You have so many people, they see our family and like, oh, you guys are amazing. I'm like, you don't know Danielle on a Friday night, man. But it's one of those deals where it hasn't been an easy everyday just snap of the fingers, but it's been a constant uphill deal where it's constantly every time, and it's every time you turn around, you respond to things different.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day, I would, you know, you're struggling for money, or you know you're going to be doing this, you get mad, and you'd be like, you just be anxious.
Yeah.
You know, oh, I might get laid off next month. I just don't care. I'm not going to let myself get broken up over the things that don't really necessarily matter.
Yes.
As someone who's almost died 3 times, tomorrow is guaranteed to none of us.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I just refuse to let fear drive my life.
We've been able to watch that process in your family, your own personal life, and it's been awesome. And one of the things that I think is important that people know is that the Christian life is a journey,
Yes.
right? There does need to be a moment where you can point to when it becomes real, you know, and it's not just church, it's real. And you use that term kind of convicted, where after you got saved, you notice you were still doing some of the same things, still treating people the same way, but there's all of a sudden it feels wrong. It's like, I shouldn't be talking this way. And then you start responding to that and changing that. And the Holy Spirit deals with you about something else. And it is an uphill process. And you look back over, you know, the last year, and you're not who you were a year ago. And you look back over the last 3 years, and you're not who you were 3 years ago. And for me, I think it makes Christianity exciting.
Yeah.
It keeps it exciting knowing I'm not done growing. This whole thing isn't over. And there is a process to this that never ends. And hopefully that encourages somebody.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think sometimes there's this misconception that you really get saved and you really pray and mean it, then all of a sudden you're totally gonna
Problem free.
problem free. You're not gonna sin anymore. You're not gonna think bad thoughts. You're not gonna snap. And it's just not true. It takes work. And we have watched you and your family put in the work and reap the benefits. The last thing I would ask you, brother, is, if you had the opportunity just to say a point or two with, the rest of the world concerning faith and family and what it all looks like, and maybe there's somebody out there that's been through what you've been through and they're still hesitant to come to church. Maybe there's somebody that's been burnt by a church before, hurt, and thinking, I'm never going to go back. Maybe it's somebody that is in drug addiction or some type of any addiction that feels like it's hopeless. What would you want to say to those people if you had the opportunity?
You're never alone. That's with the men's ministry, and especially Men's Encounter, I've probably spoken to easily 500 addicts, because sharing my story, that seems to be one of the ones these guys grab a hold of. And addiction has this tendency to keep us in our pride. Mm-hmm. And we would rather think that we're alone and no one knows our struggles. And there are people right now, I can promise you there's people in our church right now who are struggling, and their pride, they don't want to let go of that. They don't want to just step out of it. And the devil wants you in the dark. Mm-hmm. If you're in the dark, he can't shine the light. Mm-hmm. And that's the deal with addiction, is it's just this quicksand. Yeah. And I heard this said here a while back, but it's like you're in a sea of despair, and God's there. All you have to do is reach your hand out. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that
first step.
Yeah, and he wants us to make that step. He wants us to reach our hand out and ask for help, because it's there.
Amen.
And there are so many people that don't understand that pain, but there are those that do understand that pain. And it's crazy when you talk to people, they think that we're judging them, and we're not. Mm-hmm. And I've met with guys that are 30 some years into their faith, and they're like, I've never dealt with this. And getting around people who are stronger than you will lift you up.
Amen.
And being around people who just want to be around you. I mean, yes. That's a big one.
It is.
And knowing that someone cares.
Amen.
That's one of the things that I loved about the well from the minute I walked through the door. You never feel alone.
Amen. Jimmy, thanks for sharing your story with us. I think it's important that anybody that's watching, that you need somebody in your life. You need somebody to reach out to. He made the statement that you're never alone. And I think it's important that we come through on that. And if you need to talk to somebody, we want to hear from you.
100%.
If you can text directly our church at 316-295-4210. You can call that number, and we will make sure we get you directed to somebody that you can talk with, communicate with. We can't invite you to join us yet. You can join us live this coming Sunday at 10:15, but we would love to have you join us, because there really is nothing like being able to be around people that support you, that are on your team. And so I want to make sure we extend that and let you know how to get a hold of us, because we mean it when we say we are here for you.
Yes.
We mean it. And sometimes you do feel alone. You don't know who to reach out to. A lot of times it's pride.
Yep.
But if you're at a place in your life right now where you need someone to reach out to, and you're willing to lay down that pride, we want to hear from you. And you've got my word, you've got Jimmy's word, you've got Andrea's word. We will make sure that we help you and that we get connected with you, and then we get you around the people that you need, help build the team in your life. And I think most important is that we remind people that God is there now.
Yes.
Right? God is there now, and you can go to God at any minute, in any place, in any scenario, anywhere, no matter what you've done. He is there, and He's willing to meet us when we sincerely are willing to fall on our knees and do business with Him. So,
That's right.
you got any final thoughts?
No, the only last thing I can think of here is that I'm sure with Easter being so close, Easter's different for you now.
Oh, dude,
So,
I love
that's
Easter
awesome.
now. That's one of my grandkids, and yeah, I love Easter now. It's a different animal now.
Yeah.
I love it.
Love how God uses all that and just flips it back around.
It's funny how He can take something that's broken and make it whole.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's all. All right. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. We hope you have a great week.
God bless. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you.